So here's a real serious question. Are people actually nicer in the South, like we've heard, than the Northeast? Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Church Chat, a show where we have the conversations about ministry that you wish you were having. These are real conversations with real people deep in ministry about the real life struggles, obstacles, successes, all the good stuff, all the leadership stuff right here in one podcast for you. And we are so excited about this episode's sponsor, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, teds.edu/churchchat. For more information, listen, get equipped for ministry. My name is Josh.
And I'm Emily, and today's guest is Marc Ramirez. He is the District Superintendent of EFCA Southeast. We're so happy to have you on.
Awesome. Great to be here with you guys.
Yes. You used to be a pastor in our sweet district, EFCA East, right?
That's right. That's right. For 18 years.
Oh my gosh.
In the Eastern District, and loved it. Really, really enjoyed it. Was really glad to be a part of the East.
So for those listeners that maybe aren't a part of the East or don't know what we're talking about, all of us are part of the Evangelical Free Church of America, lovingly referred to as the EFCA. And Emily and I are in the Eastern District, and Marc Ramirez is now the District Superintendent of the Southeast. Pretty stoked, like it's one of those moments where when I found that out, that you were the hire for the Southeast, I was thrilled. And it wasn't just because you were leaving the East and moving further away from me.
That'd be sad.
No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks, Josh.
I was thrilled because first of all, you're great. And I respect you a ton, and I like you, and I was like, man, that is a perfect pick. But it was also one of those decisions where you're like, this encourages my heart about our organization. Like, it was just one of those where you're like, your team got it right, and you're just so happy that your team made such a good call. I wasn't happy that you're leaving it, and especially your church up there is a great church, the fellowship where you come from before you went down south. I have lots of friends that are up there. I know how much they loved you in that community, in that church. But, man, so we miss you, but it's awesome stuff that they hired you for that position.
Well, thank you. I mean, really, that's super kind, and it's been and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but it's been a big transition. I really loved my time in the East, and I have great memories of just starting out there, going to district conferences as a young pastor, and so it's been a change and a shift for me, for sure. But I'm also excited about the opportunities that are before me now.
Yeah, for sure.
Good stuff. Yeah, we are going to jump into all of that. But before we do that, we're going to play a little game of two truths and a lie.
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
I am not ready.
You're not ready?
No, I've been
on.
losing so many of these. And
oh,
Emily,
really?
Yeah, she just is, and she's getting cocky about it, Mark.
Yeah.
So it's not even like I can lose with some dignity anymore. It's just a smackdown.
Yeah, the pressure's on.
Wow. Well, we'll see how you do today.
Let's do it.
Maybe it's a new day. It's a new day. So, should I just go?
Yeah, do it.
Give you these three things here. All right. So I sang on stage at Brooklyn Tabernacle. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Pretty big church in Brooklyn, New York, with Jim Cymbala. I fell down a 50-foot waterfall and survived that as I'm here. So that's an interesting story as well. And if you know anything about me, I'm a big baseball guy. And in 3 years of high school baseball, I never struck out, something that I'm kind of glad about. So
wow.
Those are my three.
See, I'm going to rat Cedric out because he was not good at this game. I don't know if you remember that, Josh, from when we recorded
I do.
Cedric's episode. So good. Okay. But you're a DS who can bring it with this game. And I am really interested Because it feels like you had a story behind all of them.
I know.
One of them's a lie,
Usually my opinion is the best way to play this game is to keep it short and like just a one sentence fact. But the way Mark did it, he like let us on just enough on each one of those. I can't tell which one. Oh man. So do you have any clue, Emily?
No.
Please tell me you're not Googling.
I hands up. I am not cheating. Although I don't know how I'd be able to figure this out via Instagram, but I'm really sadly hoping that the waterfall is true so that I can hear this story, because that sounds utterly terrifying. But actually, so does singing in front of a bunch of people at Brooklyn Tabernacle. That sounds terrifying too.
Oh man, I think I know what I'm going to go with.
Well, you are sportsy. How difficult would it be to never strike out?
I'm not telling you that. How would you ask me that question? That's
Because
the one I'm going with. I'm going with that one. You figure your side out. I'm going with the lie is, I'm not telling you why I'm going with that one, but the 3 years, no strikeouts baseball thing.
Okay, for the sake of having a different answer, I'm going to go with Brooklyn Tabernacle.
Good.
Partly, I just really want that waterfall to be true.
Go ahead, lay it on us.
Reveal.
The lie is that I never struck out in high school baseball.
Come on, that you would
I
be.
know, that would be amazing.
You would be drafted. We wouldn't be talking to you on the podcast right now. I wasn't going to tell Emily that, but I'm also a big baseball guy. I'm like, man, maybe a season, but I don't even know if that's got to be extremely rare too in baseball world.
I had very few, but I had a couple baseball ones just because baseball's been such a big part of my life growing up, and I probably could have picked a better one, but
that's pretty good though.
Just went with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, but now I need to hear your waterfall
You had
story.
Emily.
You did.
It's just I'm a big baseball guy too, so I wasn't gonna let that one slip by. All right, what's the waterfall story?
Well, so this is when I was at Liberty University as a college student, and a bunch of us went to the Blue Ridge Mountains to just hike, and we were just hiking, a bunch of us, about 4 or 5 of us, and there was this waterfall, and we decided to kind of go into the water at the bottom, and then a couple of us started climbing up, and just a little bit between 10 feet or so, and I just kept going, and I found myself in a spot where I couldn't really go back down, and I thought the best way to actually get out of this was to just keep going up. And I slipped and I fell and hit I kind of hit a tier, bounced off that, hit it, and then went down into the bottom where it was probably about 3 or 4 feet of water. And I landed on actually like a piece of wood that had kind of like an old stump that had kind of been soaked through. And I just kind of laid there. And I had the park rangers come. I kind of got escorted out of there and taken to the hospital, and they were just kind of all surprised that I was even able to walk after that. They were just in shock, because when they showed me where I fell from, I couldn't believe that I survived.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty scary story. And since then, I don't do any of that stuff anymore. I was in that stage of life where I thought I can survive anything, and I can kind of do anything. It was in that, early 20s part of your life. And so.
Well, I'm
That's
glad
wild.
you
Good
survived
story.
it.
But what are you a vocalist? Is that what brought you to Brooklyn Tabernacle?
So when my parents got saved, we were living in Brooklyn, New York, and we were attending Brooklyn Tabernacles as a tiny little church at that time. My parents were actually one of the original charter members of that church when it got started with Jim Cimbala. They were just in a little building. And my mom is the one who tells me the story, because I don't really remember. And she said that I kept telling her that I wanted to sing the song "Do Lord." You remember that song, "Do Lord"? Like, "Do Lord, do Lord, do remember me."
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember that.
And I told her I wanted to sing that song when I was 5. And so she kind of said, "Hey, why don't you just go ask Pastor Johnson?" And he was kind of the music guy. And so I did. She didn't expect me to do it. And he said yes. And so, I sang that song. I don't really have a memory of it. I don't remember too much about it, but I heard about it growing up, how when I was 5 years old, I sang in front of the Brooklyn Tabernacle. So I say that kind of knowing that at that time it was really small, but then they grew into this big thing. And, now that, now they have this huge choir and,
Yeah.
but no, not a vocalist. But at 5 years old, apparently I had a lot of guts to do that.
Yeah,
that was
you
a
did.
very, very intriguing game of Two Truths and a Lie. And despite Mark's incredible stories, I feel like, the celebration of my win is being a little low key right now.
That's on you, man.
I finally pulled one out here. I got to know, too, that waterfall one, how many sermon illustrations has that been worked into? You ever use that one? That sounds like it's just a good one for like.
I don't know. I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have. I think one of the funniest parts of that story was I had a 5-speed and I was driving back home. I was supposed to drive back to Pennsylvania after that, and I couldn't drive. I couldn't put the clutch in. I couldn't do any of that because I was in so much pain.
Ugh.
So I had to have a friend of mine drive my car. I just remember that being a big deal. Like I actually couldn't drive and I had to have somebody kind of help me get home. But yeah, that being the worst part of that was obviously pretty good considering what it could have been. And I had a good friend of mine who was taking pictures. Of course, I still have some of those.
Wow.
Of me going into the Ranger car and getting taken to the hospital and all that. Yeah, so it was kind of put a damper on our hike.
Yeah, I guess.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Nothing like falling from a 50-foot waterfall to ruin the picnic.
Yeah, exactly. Ruin the feeling of that.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Well, on that high note, that was a good pun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay. On that high note, we're going to jump into questions. You mentioned, obviously, that you had a big kind of vocational transition going from a lead pastor to this district superintendent role. Can you share a little bit about what led you to make that transition?
The opportunity that came to me was not an opportunity I was seeking. I was really happy at Fellowship. It's a great church, wonderful people. Really thought that's where we would be until I retired, or until basically the Lord just said, I'm going to ask you to do something else. So when that opportunity came, I considered it just from the standpoint that the actual description of the job seemed to be something I could do. And when I shared it with my wife, she was, Stephanie, she was very positive about it as well. So she was supporting the decision, which was a big factor also in that, and saying this. She also felt it was something that I could do, and if this is a direction that the Lord would lead and confirm, we'll take the step, and it'll be like these little steps of faith, and just see how God continues to confirm it. And that's kind of what we did. It was really the first step we took was really, all right, I'll have a conversation about it. And that was like a small step of faith. And then the next step, would you have another one? Okay, yeah, I'll have another one. But in each of those at that time, it wasn't like I was even remotely ready to leave. I think it was the process that kind of confirmed that this was something that God was calling us to do. And one of the big thoughts behind it was, we had been, as a church, preaching through the book of Acts. And so I'd been spending a lot of time with our congregation through that. And when we were studying through the missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas, and then Paul and Silas and Timothy, one of the things we were talking about as a church is how they were going around strengthening the churches. And I was trying to connect that to the vision of the EFCA and how important that is, that the strength, the strengthening of the church, and that's what they were doing, and how exciting that is. And when this opportunity came, one of the things that really stuck out to me was this is going to be an opportunity to strengthen the churches, but not just in one congregation. And so if the Lord would open that door, then that would be the opportunity. And that's really why we took the step, is to have that kind of impact in strengthening and building up our churches.
Yeah, I love that example that you shared of decision making and discerning God's will. I mean, you've seen it in pastoral roles. So often people are like, what's God's will for me? And then it's like, just they assume they have to take it as like one big grand decision. Do I go or not go? And I love how you just took those little steps, seeking confirmation on each step, waiting for a closed door. If the door stays open, you take another little step, another little step. That's so important for like people. I mean, not just everybody to like, and such a good example of like how to actually discern God's will. It's one little step of faith at a time. And I love that. You're in this new role now, right? And part of it is to really stay connected to the heartbeat of what's going on in churches, which is why I'm so excited. One of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you on this podcast. But maybe before we get to some of the things you're seeing as you're staying connected, how do you, now in this role, you're not really in a local congregation anymore, how do you stay connected to that heartbeat, what's the unique needs of what's going on in a church and how obstacles or all that stuff? How do you stay connected to that?
Yeah, I think it's by staying connected to the pastors and the people.
Yeah.
You've got to stay connected to people, and you have to find a way to through the context of the relational context with pastors and leaders of the church, and then also being a pastor for so long. It really helps you understand also how important it is to understand the context of each local church and that they're different and unique, and appreciating that and getting and being willing to understand that and know that going into a church situation. So I visit a lot of churches now, and I go into it with that understanding. All right, what is the unique dynamic and context of this particular local church in this community with this pastoral staff, with this congregation, with this leadership team. And so when you can do that, when you can stay connected to the people of the churches, the leadership, the pastors, and where I have the opportunity to engage with the congregation, that is how that's how I think you stay connected to the heartbeat of the local church. And that's where my love is, really. And that's why I stepped into this was, I don't think I would have ever entertained anything that would be parachurch ministry. Right. That's just not for me. I think for me, the fact that this was kind of separated from the local church, but still directed to the local church is really what drew me in.
I'm just wondering, it's so easy to get caught up in, especially if you're a lead pastor, but I assume anybody in ministry that's maybe taking a lead role or something, it's easy to get caught up in all the X's and O's and the dots and the programming. Do you think that we miss that sometimes in local? Maybe we don't, but like a pastor has to stay connected to their congregation too, just to feel those felt needs. And I love that almost pastoral approach you've taken to the district level. Do you think that's something that misfires once in a while in church world, where we just get disconnected a little bit from our congregations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, at Fellowship, when you experience growth as a church, that dynamic of connection starts to change. And then you have to adapt. How are you going to now adapt as a leader to not lose those connections while the church is still growing and while you're providing vision and leadership at a higher level, but now because the church is a different size and continuing to grow and your staff is growing, how do you maintain those connections? And I think I learned that more at the local church level of how to do that. And I don't know that I have a playbook per se, but right. I learned through, well, this isn't working, or I'm noticing that I really don't know or understand this. I used to be a part of every new membership class. As the church grew, I wasn't a part of those anymore.
Yeah.
That I used to know a lot of our new members by that. And I had to find different ways now to engage. And so I think that's the key, is you adapt and you find different ways so that you don't lose it completely, but you find ways to accomplish what you're trying to do, but in a different way.
So I want to circle back to the context a bit, because that's so interesting. As believers, we think a lot about context, like while reading our Bible, of like, what context is this? And obviously you two think about context in your own churches and whatnot. But I think, for both Josh and I being in the East, we have kind of a myopic vision of what churches are facing and needing. So what was that like for you, going from more of an Northeast context to Southeast? Are you finding it to be different church culturally? Are they facing different things? How has that been?
Yeah, that's been an adjustment, just getting used to the differences in the landscape of ministry around, the communities around you. I was in northeastern Pennsylvania, highly Catholic, very, very low percent of evangelicals or churched, people. Now I can go visit a church in much more of a kind of, it's not necessarily, I mean, in the Southeast, there certainly are Bible Belt areas. And so that presents now a different context of, all right, how is that church trying to now disciple? How are they evangelizing? How are they reaching the community? And so, yeah, it does. I think it presents some challenges and changes in the approach of what we're doing. And what I've tried to do is try to understand the particular context of each church and appreciate that about them. Because as a pastor, when you pastor a church, that's one of the things you really appreciate that people do, especially if they're coming in at a district level or at another level, is, hey, appreciate the fact that this is an area that you know well. You've spent time, the community, and you want that to kind of be appreciated and understood. And so learning as much as I can about that. And then being able to sit with a pastor and a leader and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And just being able to, give some thoughts of things they can consider and do. Because as you guys know, you're in a district role, you're an influencer. I mean, you're not a decider. You're not going, I mean, we have autonomous local churches.
Yeah.
So they decide, but you're in a role where you get to now interact and provide some, insight where possible.
So here's a real serious question. Are people actually nicer in the South, like we've heard, than the Northeast? Is it?
There's definitely you can see the Southern hospitality aspect of things that is different from the Northeast. And I think I have to adjust to that because my kind of Northeast approach might be more like, well, I'm not exactly sure how to take that. Like, is that real or is it
our Northeast skepticism?
Our skepticism of kind of like, well, what's that about?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I'm adjusting to is, I don't know, just kind of, I guess, the speed of things and how they happen. I remember talking to a couple of our leaders about some of the things we're looking to do in the district. And we're like, I'm hoping that we can have this done, by the end of the year, and this one by the end. And the one guy was like, Mark, you're in the Southeast. Take your time. And I'm like, oh.
Man, that sounds wonderful.
But at the same time, then I don't always get that vibe. So it's kind of like, okay, I guess that's one perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's everyone's.
So kind of, it does sound like it's been a transition, and transitions can be hard. Even if you're not transitioning to like a different church or a completely different job, there are always going to be transitions in ministry roles. And, whether that's a transition of like a heart posture of needing to like do something different, or a transition of programs or whatever. So what advice would you give to somebody who is walking through a transition?
I think I'll start with, and make sure I get to the question that you asked, but I'll start by just speaking to what has been just challenging for us. This was a really big step of faith for Stephanie and I to take. We had very deep, strong relationships in our church at Fellowship. People we cared deeply about, and they cared deeply about us. We hosted a community group in our home for pretty much the entire time since we launched community groups back in 2012. We had people, so we just had so we miss that. We miss those people. We miss our kids. Our two daughters are in Pennsylvania, and we miss them. We have family. My wife's parents, my two sisters. So we just have things that are just like, we miss a lot of the closeness that we had with the people that we care about deeply, and that's been a challenge and a growth process for us. And so I think when I think about advice, then okay, well then how are you going to help others who are looking at potential transitions and significant changes in ministry? And I've already had to do that because as a DS, when a church is in transition, they reach out to you, and now you're talking to a person who's going to go through that. And so I'm going through it myself, and now I'm,
Yeah.
trying to help somebody else who's going to go through it. And so I've tried to, just apply some of the things that I've learned, and share with them. And one of the things I say is, you really do need to understand that this is a step of faith, and faith means that you don't have it all laid out in front of you. It's
Mm.
not, you're stepping in, there is a step into the unknown, but you're trusting God and you're believing in faith that God is leading you to take this step. And that should give you a sense of peace and a sense of comfort. But at the same time, it's not necessarily easy. It's a
Mm.
challenge, because it's a step of faith. I think that's that walk by faith, not by sight. And then the other thing I always say is make sure that you and your spouse are unified. That's been absolutely essential for us. There's just no way that it would be even possible without the support of Stephanie. And so, when you make a significant change, you need that unity of your spouse, and so that's been huge. And so that's one of the questions I'll talk to some pastors. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this or I'm thinking about that. Oh, so how does your wife feel about it? Have you guys talked about it as a family? You start getting a sense that there's not unity there. I'll say you better start there before you actually start
Mm.
evaluating more about the role or the opportunity, because that's going to be a factor. And so, those kinds of things, just being of one heart, one mind. And then I think the other thing that I've learned is prepare to learn all over again, because I went from a comfortable sweet spot, was what I would call it, in ministry at Fellowship. Things were going well. It's kind of that the early part of your ministry, you're always like, let's get through this difficulty, let's get through the trouble, let's get through and then you get to a place where you're like, okay, I think the people have caught the vision, we're unified, we're going in a direction. Then you move, like then you change. And now I'm learning all over again. Like I'm in that uncomfortable space of I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to build new relationships. And so God has just put me in a different place of discomfort. And but I think that's been intentional. I really do. It's been part of what has now been a new part of the growth for me, personally. So all of that kind of plays into kind of the advice that we would give.
You said you got to prepare to learn. So like over this last transition, you're a couple months in, how has your like view or approach of leadership evolved? Like what have you been learning about leadership in today's climate in the church?
There's a lot I'm learning about, just even, I'm an EFCA guy. It's not like I have to relearn the EFCA, but I'm learning the differences and the distinctions between the districts. That's
Yeah.
been one difference. And so that's been a change. I think the learning the dynamic of leadership in a local church setting, a pastor's building relationships with elders and church staff and ministry leaders and your congregation. And I kind of had a good way felt I had a way of doing that, and I kind of knew how I was doing that. And you did that through the investment of time, right, with people and
Mm.
relationships, and that built trust. Now I'm learning the dynamics of leadership at a district level, but I don't see the people that I'm leading every week. They're not in my community group. I'm not in the counseling sessions with them. It's very different. And so I'm learning now how to lead better in smaller, I guess what I would call smaller sample sizes, where I don't have the frequency of interaction. But when I have the interaction, I need to maximize it. And so how do I do that? And that's part of what I'm learning as I go through this a little
Any
more.
tricks to like maximizing those interactions?
I think it's just been recognizing that the time with people is so important and essential. And so when I go on a church visit, how I even try to logistically plan that has been a part. I've learned how to, even since my first visit to a church, I've learned how to, I think I need to arrive around probably, a day before, have this full day, these kinds of things I'm learning. One of the other things I'm learning is where I have the opportunity to engage with the pastor or the church leaders at the site of the church. Being on site, seeing the context of their church ministry
Mm.
is just huge. And so that's a small sample size. I only have like a day or two. But if I can do that there rather than meeting somewhere, at a
Right.
restaurant or something, that really makes a big difference, because you see things like, oh, I see that you have a school across the street. That's not something you really talk about.
Right.
But now, hey, how is that factoring into your approach to, those kinds of things?
Oh, that's good.
There's just you don't get that until you're actually there and you can see things. And so that's one of the things that I've learned, and just trying to take advantage of that as best I can.
Here's another really important piece of information that you need to know from our sponsor, TEDS. That's who we lovingly call Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. They have their courses and content accessible for you wherever you are via the internet. So convenient. I went off the rails there.
Hey, it's the internet. It's distracting for everybody.
The internet is a huge distraction.
Mm-hmm. But you could be distracted in a good way by taking seminary classes at TEDS.
Yes, and you don't have to sign up for a degree. They offer graduate certificates that start at $170 a credit.
It's amazing.
That's like 2 tanks of gas. Okay, I drive a big Tahoe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are you driving?
Oh man, you could totally do it. $170 a credit for a graduate certificate. Get started. The certificates usually are 12 credits long, and the credits can be if at some point you decide you want to continue on and get your master's degree, these credits will all transfer right into a master's program. So you can test the waters of education. If you're thinking, hey, maybe I want to get a master's, an MDiv or something in ministry. Test it out with the certificate program, and then if you decide, you can transfer those credits over. It's a great, convenient, affordable way to start your secondary education. Get all the information you need at teds.edu/churchchat. That's TEDS.edu/churchchat.
So I'm going to harken back to a previous thing that you were talking about. You were at the same church for a long time. I think you said 18 years. And I think in transition and change, we're often looking ahead, looking like what you're going to, because it's exciting, it's new. But I wonder, how did you choose to leave well? I'm assuming you left well. Clearly your heart is probably still with a lot of people at Fellowship, and you were there for so long. So and it seems like obviously probably the transition, you said you took kind of small steps to make this transition. So it probably wasn't wham bam completely. So you had some lead up time, but that's still difficult to leave something that you've been to for so long. Yeah,
I actually really appreciate you asking that question, because that was a really, really important part of this equation for us, is how do we leave well, which you guys know, being in district leadership and ministry, that is so important in helping churches do this. And it's one of the big things that I'm working on in the district. Anytime there's a church going through a pastoral transition or a leadership transition, that is a tremendous opportunity for the district to engage and help the church through it. So that was really important to me, really, really important. In fact, it was one of the reasons, believe it or not, as weird as this may sound, it was one of the reasons why I felt peace about leaving, because the church was healthy. The church was in a good place, and I wasn't running from anything. And I wasn't leaving because I was done with all of this. It was really, in the years, even probably when if I could trace back to when I felt like I was in the sweet spot of ministry, where things were going really well, the church was growing, we were unified, all of those things. One of the things that I felt like the Lord was really making clear to me was, Mark, hold on to this very loosely. And I think as a pastor, when you see that kind of growth and you're leading well, it's very easy to grab on. And so I was already thinking to myself, all right, I got to do this. I got to hold loosely. This is the Lord's, not mine. So I think that was also played into it. When this opportunity came, it felt like God was saying, okay, I've been telling you about holding loosely, and now you're really going to have to learn to let it go. And it was an incredibly powerful just process of sitting down, having very, very difficult conversations with my elder chair, then the elder board, then the staff. I mean, there was just these pieces, my family. It was like, man, how many more hard conversations do I have to have about this? I mean, I just remember the feeling I had. It was wearing me, just having to have these difficult conversations that this is what we feel God is leading us to do. But my last Sunday at Fellowship, was incredible. The church called Stephanie, called us up with my family. The elders gathered around us. The entire pastoral staff gathered around us. Then they asked the congregation, where possible, to stand up and just put their hands out. I mean, you had this picture of this entire congregation and of praying for us and saying, we're not necessarily just saying goodbye to you. We're sending you in the name of the Lord to go do what it is that you're doing. And that was just incredibly powerful. And I think a picture of what leaving well can look like. And we were just so blessed by that.
So you may not have intentionally done that because you probably weren't planning to make this transition, but like, is there any attitudes or things that pastors could be doing to make transitions look like that? You know, like, I think there's a increasing trend's not the right word, but just hopefully like attitude of people being willing to replace themselves, like to build that into kind of the culture of your church staff, that you're always replaceable, but not in like a bad way.
Right.
But is there any, things that you could be doing to make that go well when it ever does happen?
Yeah, I think it's something that we talk about actually a lot with our churches now, and some of the pastors that are thinking, hey, in the next whatever period of time, maybe it's 5 years, 3 to 5 years, I think I see this coming. How do I prepare well? And I think it is something pastors and leaders have to think about, so that they are in the process of preparing the church and the leadership, the staff, the elders, and you lead in a way where you are don't lead in a way where you're not making yourself indispensable. And I think to do that, you have to be able to give responsibility to different people and empower them to lead. And I think you have to have some sense of security in doing that it's not a threat to you to do that, but that it's actually empowering and beneficial for the church. And then when you're able to, when you do step out, that hole doesn't seem as big because you've been preparing the church. But that has to happen up here first, like in the mind. Like pastors really need to get this understood in their mind to be thinking through it the right way, to be able to then live it out or act it out. And I think most of them really would love to do this well. They need help and in thinking through it in their particular context. But I think it's a huge opportunity for anyone in any kind of denominational leadership to help churches do this well. Because if we can do this better, it can have huge impact on the health of our churches.
It also leaves a legacy for the individual, as opposed to somebody who hangs on too long and is unwilling to let go. And you can kind of see like how that'll crumble a place and really can ruin. I don't know if ruin's the right word, just because we're talking about stuff God does too in our hearts. But, it can really affect the legacy that a leader or pastor kind of leaves if they hold on too hard and they stay too long. And being willing to pass the baton and actually ensures, the hardest person to replace is somebody who's constantly trying to replace themselves. That's the hard leader to find out there. That's the best kind of leader. Besides that kind of topic, what other challenges are you like seeing as you've kind of like zoomed out to 30,000 feet now, and you're seeing church world from a much broader view than even we see it. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that pastors are facing now in today's culture and time?
There seems to be a couple different areas where you're seeing some of these, categories of either stress or difficulty or anxiety that's kind of weighing on pastors right now. And I think one of them is I guess maybe I'll put it under the category of like pace or longevity. How are pastors working with their leadership teams on a healthy ministry pace for them now, like right now in the midst of what they're going through, whether it's a leadership transition, whether we're about to launch a new ministry, whether we're down a staff member, because every church always has something going on that is the reason why things are the way they are right now, but soon they won't be. But the reality is that never seems to change. It's just the newest thing. What is it? And so I think pace, just helping them helping them understand how to even navigate that. And that's usually conversations with leadership. I think the other thing, so I think that's one, and I think that helps to that speaks to the personal health of the pastor and the family is just having a healthy pace for ministry and rhythm. I think the other is there's this tension that I'm seeing with pastors, and I felt it myself. You want to remain biblically faithful. So there's that one side. That's one side of the pull. And I think the other is you really want to be likable and friendly, and you want to be winsome and caring and compassionate and all these other words, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel like you can't be both. And how do you do that? How do you do that in the different, circumstances? And I think just helping pastors through some of those conversations has been encouraging, at least ones I've had with some guys. The particular circumstance may be different for each one, but it's kind of under that category of I'm really trying to do what's right here, but I'm also really struggling with what it's going to look like, how it's going to turn out, what people are going to say, all of that. And it can be a real struggle.
Oh, that
and
tension
so I was
is so real. That is such a real tension. When you do a psychological profile on me, like I come up really high with being able to make the high risk decisions, like that D kind of in the disc, if you're familiar with that. And I also come up really high in like wanting to be approved of by people, or, like that kind of like I piece, that like life of the party kind of thing. So it's torture. Making the hard, high risk decision means that people are not going to like it. And then I beat myself up over the decision I just made, even though I know it's the right decision. That's a hard tension. So that's a hard what do you tell somebody that's like weighing that? Like, how would you coach me through that?
And it's you don't want to make it sound too simplistic, because it's not. And I recognize that it is complex, but I think sometimes you need to reduce something down to be a little bit simpler, just so that you're not overcomplicating every single, decision.
Yeah.
And I think you just got to recognize what it is. So some of the things that we talk about is recognizing some of the things that you are responsible for and taking ownership of those, and then recognizing that some of the things that you're not responsible for, and do not try to take ownership of those. And so, for example, you are responsible to the Lord for the decisions that you make, and you want to make them wise. I mean, you want to make wise decisions. You want to be wise about them, and you want to be faithful to the Lord. But you're not necessarily responsible for how everyone reacts to it. Right. And when you try to manipulate that, I think that's where you can run into a lot of even internal struggles, because now you're struggling with yourself because you recognize you're doing it and it bothers you. And I think that's the risk part that you're talking about. Well, I've just got to be able to lay it out before the church. Here's what I think we should do in faith. But then it hurts. I mean, that's the thing. We are people, and it hurts us when we see those we care about and love that are either hurting or upset with us or not pleased with the decision that we make. And I think that's one of the difficulties of pastoring is that's something we deal with regularly.
Yeah, and I love that you use that word manipulating in there. Like when you're trying to manipulate that's probably been, it just makes it worse. That's where you end up causing church hurt, where trust is kind of broken. It's almost better to like be clear, even though be clear and caring, even if it's difficult, rather than trying to manipulate or sway people to see it your way or whatever. Yeah,
and sometimes that gets called out. You will have some people who recognize that that's happening, and they'll say, "Hey, wait a minute! It seemed like you made this with this in mind," which really wasn't a convictional decision. It was one where you were trying to actually make the decision based on what you thought the outcome might be or the reaction might be. And that, as a leader, I don't think you want to deal with that. You rather be in a position where you can look someone in the eye, you can sit with somebody and say, I made this decision with conviction and trust and belief that this is what the Lord was asking. And when you can do that so much better with peace when you're not trying to manipulate the results, because that's just what you did, and you left the results into the Lord's hands. But at the same time, don't be ignorant of the repercussions or consequences of your decisions,
right? Yeah.
And have that as part of the wisdom in what you're doing. Don't just be like, well, I don't really care what people think.
Right. That's the other way.
That's the
that
other
causes just as much damage.
Yeah,
too.
that's not
We're just doing it.
not good. One of the things I find myself talking about a lot with pastors now and different leaders is leading with clarity.
Yeah.
Leading with clarity is big, and it's not reactive. I don't feel when you lead with clarity, it's not reactive, it's proactive.
Yeah.
And it forces you as a leader to be able to articulate and clarify what it is that you're looking to do. And so I think that's really important. When people are confused or they feel like mixed signals are being given to them, it does not produce unity, and it does produce some uncertainty. So lead with clarity, even if by doing so, you're making it known to those who are with you on that you might think, well, if I'm too clear, then I'm going to separate kind of the ones who are for me, the ones who are against me. But at least what you're doing is everyone knows you're laying your cards out there and you're being completely transparent. And I think it's really important. A lot of times I'll talk about clarity, leading with conviction. In other words, that it's based on some sort of, convictional thought. Care, there's care has to be there for sure. And then vision. People want to know where they're going and where you're going, where you think you're going to take them. And when those things are present, it makes it a whole lot easier for people to follow well.
Yeah, clarity is so important. And this is going to sound kind of Captain Obvious-ish, but what if you're hoping to be a leader who leads with clarity? What are some steps to do before that? How would you develop that as a habit or an adjective in your leadership?
I think you got to ask yourself why questions before you ask yourself what questions. So if you're if you're a doer, you're going to do, right? And so let's have a Bible study on Wednesday. Let's have a men's study in the morning. Let's have a women's study in the evening. Let's have a retreat this weekend. Let's do an outreach next month. But let's step back and go, okay, why are we doing what we're doing? How does it fit in with our mission and vision as a church? And then if we can answer that why question ourselves, we should be able to articulate it to the congregation, to the people. And that is right there. That process is clarifying without you even saying it. It's just happening. That's one way that I have found to be really helpful in just knowing how to navigate, the differences between just kind of doing and leading with more clarity.
Totally. So kind of zooming even further out, what do you see as the future of the church? It can be within the EFCA or just kind of more church in general. And within in the Southeast, since that's your major sphere of influence right now, what are your kind of hopes? What kind of impact would you like to make on the Southeast moving forward?
Well, I think I think a lot about the mission of the EFCA. So I'm kind of taking that, what I just said to you earlier about the why. And I think, okay, well, our mission is to multiply transformational churches among all people. And I love that. I love that mission. I'm excited about that. As part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I feel like what I'm doing is advancing that cause, that mission. I love the church. And so I'm looking at any opportunity I have to help strengthen a church and make a church more healthy, build up a pastor, do those things. It's positioning that church to be more readily available to multiply in a healthy way. And that's our mission, and that's good. And so, and then at the same time, if they're doing that, then the church that is being born is a new church, but one that is already hopefully having within it instilled the values and the ingredients for health. That's exciting to me, where I have the opportunity to be a part of those things. And in the Southeast, what's super exciting is I looked at a U.S. News and World Report article earlier in the year that came out, and it was talking about the top 25 fastest growing cities in the United States. And I think it was 17 of them are in the Southeast district of the EFCA.
Wow.
There's a shift happening in population from the West and the North to the Southeast. And that presents opportunity for us. For what? Well, to multiply transformational churches among all people. And with that comes all peoples. Like there's an all peoples factor happening because the people transitioning in are from all over. And so getting our current churches excited about that then puts them in a position of multiplying. And then the new churches are just super exciting to see where they're just so excited the fact that they exist and they have this opportunity now, to minister the gospel in a specific community. That's the big picture approach that I'm taking is how can I help be a part of making that happen in the Southeast? And I'm super excited about that.
Love that. We end every episode with what you're loving right now, and it doesn't have to be serious. Anybody want to go first? Sure.
I think the first thing that came into my mind was I'm loving the fall season in the Southeast.
What is that like?
I know.
It's so warm and it's beautiful and I love it. I love that. Steph and I went for a bike ride the other night. I think it was the last day of the month. We're like, oh, it's September 30th and we're riding our bike and it's, we've got shorts and t-shirt on and it's just absolutely beautiful out. And so we're loving that. And speaking as a baseball fan, I'm a big Dodgers fan and I'm loving the fact that my team is gearing up for postseason baseball, which is one of my favorite things. There's not a lot of things I do to kind of really just relax and disengage from all this stuff that we've been talking about. That's one of the things that really helps me do that, is just being able to watch baseball and talk about baseball. And my wife's a big baseball fan, so that makes it great. But yeah, I'm excited about the Dodgers. Hopefully they won't disappoint me in 5 days or
hopefully they disappoint you in the NLD National League Series when they play the Phillies. Actually, I don't even know if man. So this probably isn't airing. So by the time we're saying all this, people know the results probably of the World Series. But
they'll probably be feeling sorry for me.
Yeah, I can't say I love baseball. We're such a baseball family too. I can't believe we've never connected about baseball. But I also can't say I'm loving it because I'm a Phillies fan, and you just can't get your hopes too high. It just is a dangerous road.
It crushes you.
Oh yeah, been down that road too many times. So I'm hopeful, but man, there's a lot of teams that are playing hot baseball, and Phillies aren't one of them right now, even though they had second best record in baseball or whatever. So I guess I have to say what I'm loving. I don't know. Emily, you got to go. I don't know.
Okay. Gosh, I feel like you're never prepared for this.
I am never. I don't plan this.
I know, because you don't pre-plan this. I think about it like while I'm driving. I'm like, what am I going to say for this one? I am a huge reader. I love to read. That is one of the ways I disconnect from everything. But I am also an introvert and don't need to be around a lot of people. But I am part of a book club that I really love. And even though it meets on Sundays, which is just kind of a rough day for people who are in ministry, like I'm always super tired at the end of a Sunday, but I'm always glad that I went. And we just restarted this past week and it was a delight, even though I didn't even read the book, which makes me feel like a terrible person. I know. I didn't, of all the things.
Like Jim Halpert.
Yeah, for real. But I went and it was great.
Did they shun you because you hadn't read any of the book?
No, somebody else had also not read the book.
So they couldn't shun both.
I thought that was kind of like a rule of book club.
Yeah, isn't that how book clubs
don't break the rule of book club, which is read the book.
Yeah, it's like there's one rule of book club. The first rule of book club is read the book. The second rule of book club is read the book.
Well, to be honest, we had a serve day on Saturday, and the person whose house hosts the book club was serving with me, and I had mentioned like, hey, I did not read this book. It was Anxious for Nothing by Max Lucado. And she's like, to be honest, you didn't need to read the book. Like, you could just, by our discussion,
what
you'll
if
know.
They're listening to your book club could listen to this. Now they're gonna know. Well, I guess that leaves it up to me, huh? I'm loving fall too, but I'm loving northeast fall with leaves changing, the temperature. I don't know where this airs. Did I do this last time?
I don't know. No, I'm just laughing because this episode probably will come out in the spring.
January.
And it'd be like,
spring,
it's fall.
Well, the baseball stuff will apply then, but, well, not really. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm loving the cool temperatures, the cool breeze this morning. It's a little bit overcast.
Yeah, you're a sweatshirt guy.
I'm a sweatshirt guy.
See, maybe I know that because you did say that last time.
If I did... Too bad. I'm not coming up with another one on the spot. I shifted from, I love all these conversations. That's what I used to.
Exactly. And
Mark, that's what used to be my go-to answer. I'm loving these conversations. Now I'm loving the weather.
Yeah, so that's okay.
Well, thanks so much. I have so many takeaways from this. I took a ton of notes. Our readers can't see it, but you guys can. That's all notes from this conversation. That's a bunch of pages right there. I just love some of my takeaways were just taking little steps. Stay connected to your congregation while you're holding your ministry loosely. Lead with clarity and connection and care and vision. Mark, you just said so many really good things for us I'm excited for this one to get out there into the world and for people to hear it. So I just want to say thanks for being on here again. Appreciate you, man. Excited to see how God uses you in this new role. I'm excited to see how healthy your church is. And you did such a good job of preparing them and your team. And they're just still knocking it out of the park up here in the Northeast. And we don't have a fancy way to say goodbye. Thanks for listening, everybody. We love you and we appreciate you. And so for now, we'll just say see you later.
Bye.
The Churchhead Podcast is for educational purposes only. We dive deep into important and sometimes sensitive conversations and topics about life in ministry. Please know that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely the views and the opinions of the guests and the hosts and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for. Nor should our views or opinions be considered a full perspective of circumstances that may be mentioned in this podcast. Our perspectives are limited, and so will be this podcast. What we hope to do is have conversations and spark greater conversations that will lead leaders and their organizations towards greater health. The Church Chat Podcast is edited by Emily Gardner and produced by Emily Gardner and Josh Ott. The Church Chat Podcast is supported by EFCA East, an Eastern District of the Evangelical Free Church of America covering 6 states. EFCA East helps leaders live well, lead well, and multiply, helping churches find new vitality and multiply transformational churches on the East Coast. The EFCA is multiplying transformational churches among all people. For more information, visit efcaeast.com. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and can't wait to see you on the next Church Chat episode.